The human design system is a modern synthesis of ancient esoteric wisdom grounded in scientific principles. Human design synthesizes the wisdom of astrology, the Kabbalah, the Chinese I Ching, the Hindu chakra system, and quantum physics. The origins of the system are where science and mysticism intersect. So things get interesting here because we're going to be hopping back and forth between things that are thought of as esoteric, sort of mystical, maybe even a little woo-woo systems, and some actual grounded science, starting with this supernova 1987A that happened in February of 1987. And so you can see here, this was actually a significant event. It was covered in Time magazine just about a month later after it happened, sometime in February of 1987. And it was significant because this supernova within the Tarantula Nebula of the Large Magellanic Cloud Galaxy was visible from Earth. And as scientists observed it, they saw a release of neutrinos, these very prolific subatomic particles. And the energy of this release of neutrinos was equivalent to all the visible light in the entire known universe. So while studying data from the event, scientists observed tiny oscillations, which suggested that neutrinos indeed had mass. Now, this is significant because scientist Wolfgang Pauli was the first to postulate the theoretical existence of neutrinos in 1931, but they weren't validated to have mass until much later. Scientists actually created this massive superconductor. It's actually called Super Kamiokande superconductor, and it's in Japan. And you can see here that there are these two human beings inside this massive structure. It also contains a tank of water and 50 million gallons of water or tons of water or something like that. It's a massive amount of water. And it was designed to study these tiny, tiny particles that had been thought of as ghost particles for a very long time, in that they move through solid mass with very little to no resistance at the speed of light. And so it was questioned whether they actually had enough mass to interact with matter. Now, I know you must be asking, what does this have to do with this system that's supposed to be based on astrology and kind of tell me about who I am? Well, we're getting to that. Bear with me here. On an average day, 3 trillion neutrinos flow through the Earth every second, traveling at close to the speed of light, passing through solid objects with no resistance, creating a vast field of energy and information. It's a moving field of energy information. In fact, we are right now, as I speak, and whenever you're watching this video, existing within a sea of neutrinos. There are neutrinos flowing through every square inch of space every second. They are so prolific. And because, okay, here we go. Research into these mysterious and prolific particles continued for decades, even after Wolfgang Pauli first postulated their existence. But even after supernova 1987A, during which the reported number of neutrinos passing through the Earth swelled from 3 trillion to 9 trillion per second, this did not offer definitive proof of their mass until June of 1998, when the experiment of this Super Kamiokande superconductor that I just showed you completed an experiment during which neutrinos were observed to change from one type to another, which could only occur if they had mass. Okay, so like I showed you before, there was this massive superconductor that was built to study these tiny little particles. They gathered information from this explosion, the supernova in 1987, but they weren't actually able to validate the mass of the particle until 1998, when all of their data had been combed through. And so they validated that this neutrino has mass. The significance of this confirmation of the neutrino's mass pertains to the ability of distant celestial bodies to impact physical life on Earth. So if neutrinos actually have mass, they can transfer information from one object to another on their journey through the cosmos. So this is where we get into the scientific soundness of the system of human design. Neutrinos are produced mostly in stars. 70% of the neutrinos that are passing through the Earth come from our sun. But neutrinos are coming at us from all directions, from every star in the universe. And now that we know that they have mass, we can understand that these tiny particles travel at cosmic speeds, transferring information from one object to the next, and then continuing on their journey. Therefore, it is scientifically sound to suggest that neutrinos passing through, for example, the planet Jupiter, and then moving through the Earth, will transfer information from Jupiter into every object on the planet. Isn't that an interesting thing to contemplate? That this explosion of a star so far away in the universe gave scientists information, because that's what happened, is that the neutrinos and the light that was traveling through space from this explosion, it carries information. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. And so the information travels these vast distances, or from the objects in our solar system as neutrinos pass through them, and arrive at our planet and our physical bodies, and they're actually able to interact with the matter that makes us. And so around the same time that scientists were conducting this experiment, learning more about neutrinos, a man who came to call himself Ra Uruhu, he was having an experience on the island of Ibiza, which is in the Balearic Islands of Spain. I actually spent summer on the island of Ibiza, and at the time I knew nothing about human design, but if I had, I could have gone and met this man who died in the year 2011. But Ra was given information. The plot thickens when we explore a mystical revelation received by Alan Robert Krakauer, a Canadian man who had left civilization behind to live in the countryside of Ibiza, one of the Balearic Islands off the coast of Spain. In January of 1987, about 6 weeks prior to that supernova, Krakauer found his small country-style stone shelter, a little casita in the campo, the countryside of the island of Ibiza. It was filled with a light and a commanding presence that he called the voice. For the rest of his life and all throughout his teachings of this system, he simply referred to this light and this presence as the voice. And there's a whole story. He tells the whole story of these 8 days. If you ever wanted to go on YouTube, there's a video of it. He tells the story, and it's quite fascinating. But for the following 8 days, the voice dictated the human design system to Krakauer, including information that neutrinos have mass and are a cosmic programming mechanism, specifically delivering imprinting information to the information structure of the human DNA. Okay, so here is where we get to the intersection of Ra and his experience receiving this mystical download of information, and that supernova that scattered all these neutrinos through the universe, and scientists receiving this information. Now, what's interesting is that Ra, he validated, excuse me, let's close that one up here. Ra received information in January of 1987 that neutrinos have mass. He was given this information by the voice, but science wasn't actually able to validate it through the information they received from the superconductor until June of 1998. The information was actually available to humanity at that time, as if we were able to perceive the light of the supernova, which we were, it was actually visible to the naked eye. The information was also instantly available. And so science went around it its way. It created a superconductor, it conducted experiments with the scientific method, and it combed through the data that it gleaned from those experiments for another several years before it was able to validate what Ra was able to receive um, directly from this presence called the voice. He received directly the information that neutrinos have mass. So it's very interesting that these different ways of knowing, but they converge in this system. And